The Jonathan Kuminga restricted free agency saga is finally over. Exactly 3 months since the opening of NBA free agency, in one day before the deadline for his qualifying offer, sources confirmed to NBC Sports Bay Area that Kuminga is signing a 2-year, $48.5 million contract, as ESPN Shams Charania first reported. Now, let's first talk about the contract details. Like I said, 2 years, $48.5 million. But on this second year is the team option. The Warriors got what they wanted in the end when it came to the back half of the contract. Kuminga in his camp with agent Aaron Turner always wanted to get the player option at the end of the contract, but the Warriors never relented. So in the end, the Warriors got the team option, but Kuminga actually got what he wanted as well when it comes to having a little more control over his immediate future. Why? That's because Jonathan Kuminga actually turned down a 3-year, $75 million offer by the Warriors that also had a team option on the back end of that contract as well. Now, the second year of this team option, I'm being told on the deal that Jonathan Kuminga is signing, can essentially at the end of the 2025-26 season, so going into next offseason, can essentially be wiped away by the Warriors or any team that Jonathan Kuminga can get traded to, which would give the opportunity for Jonathan Kuminga to again get into contract negotiations or be a free agent. So that's where we're at. Contract 2 years, $48.5 million with a team option on the back end. What does it mean? Well, it means that the Warriors can finally truly sign DeAnthony Melton. They can finally actually sign Al Horford, and they can finally actually sign Seth Curry to make it the real Splash Brothers now between Steph Curry and Seth Curry for the Warriors as their 15th man. The Seth Curry situation is interesting because he's essentially going to get a camp deal to first start. Then he'll need to be cut, and he can't be actually signed to the roster until November 15th. So he's coming in for camp, being acclimated with the team. We always wanted to be with the Warriors when it came to this part of his career, but he won't actually be with the Warriors at the start of the season. That will happen November 15th. Complicated, I know, but that's what happened with now that all the figures when it comes to Jonathan Kuminga have finally been pen to ink with Jonathan Kuminga and the Warriors. Now, what is Jonathan Kuminga's fit on the Warriors? The first 4 years of Jonathan Kuminga's Warriors tenure have been a battle of what's best for the team and what's best for the player. There's been ups, there have been downs. And then, of course, there was this 3-month saga when it came to his restricted free agency. Now, I went out, wrote a column for NBCSportsBayArea.com that said that this actually is the time that the Warriors need the best out of Jonathan Kuminga. Why is that? Let's first talk about the team that he's surrounded with. We've seen that the Warriors can win without Jonathan Kuminga's desired style of play, without having the ball in his hands, without him being a starter, without him finishing games, playing more of that one-on-one basketball compared to Steve Kerr's style of a pure ball movement offense led by the uniqueness, of course, of Steph Curry. There have been so many question marks of how Jonathan Kuminga fits with Steph Curry, how he fits with Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, so on and so forth. Let's first talk about the ages of those guys. Steph Curry, 37 years old going into the season. Jimmy Butler, 36. Draymond Green. Now, the real old guy is Al Horford, who's 39. There's other 30-year-olds too, with Buddy Hield being 32, Gary Payton II also being 32, Seth Curry being 35. And that right there is 7 players for the Warriors who are in their 30s with an average age of just over 35 years old. And the number is really even a little bit higher if you go into the fact that Gary Payton II will turn 33 on December 1st, and a few weeks later, Buddy Hield will join him as a 33-year-old on December 17th. So yes, this is an unprecedented older team that still has championship aspirations. So where does Jonathan Kuminga fit into that? He is going to turn 23 years old about 2 weeks before the regular season begins. And you need that youth infusion between Jonathan Kuminga, guys like Brandon Pajemski, Moses Moody. You look at some of the other younger role players in Quentin Post, Trace Jackson Davis. D'Anthony Melton should be in his prime at 27 years old. His injury history kind of changes things around when it comes to that. You got Guy Santos also being 23 years old, and second-round draft pick rookie Will Richard is 22 years old. He signed a 4-year contract with the first 2 years being guaranteed, so he will be on the 15-man roster as well. But Jonathan Kuminga, he has the most upside, the most potential, which has been the P word that has been very conflicting when it comes to his first 4 years with the Warriors, that he still is more potential than production. But of all those players, no one else can go out and get you 20 points on any given night like Jonathan Kuminga can. Are there still shooting concerns with that? Yes, there are. When it came to before his really, really bad sprained ankle before last season, Jonathan Kuminga, on not a super high volume by any means, but he was actually shooting just over 40% on catch and shoot 3-pointers. So when he gets into the mode of holding onto the ball, dribbling too much, that's when you run into trouble with Jonathan Kuminga. It needs to either be catch and shoot or get right downhill to the rim. If he's trying to dribble, and get to a mid-range, dribble, and for some reason shoot a 3, those are just bad shots for Jonathan Kuminga. I already talked about the ages of the Warriors core. The schedule, that shows that the Warriors are going to need Jonathan Kuminga as well. The Warriors have 2 sets of back-to-backs right away in their first 5 games. Then it gets to 5 in their first 17 games. By the end of 2025, the calendar year, the Warriors will have played 8 sets of back-to-backs. The first day that Jonathan Kuminga can be traded is January 15th, which is their 40th game of the regular season. That by then, they'll also be playing 9 back-to-backs, and they will have 10 back-to-backs by the February 5th trade deadline. Those are all ample opportunities for a 23-year-old Jonathan Kuminga to go out and be more of a focal point offensively, when an Al Horford will take a night off, a Jimmy Butler will take a night off, a Steph Curry will take a night off, a Draymond Green will possibly take a night off as well. And even in those games that they're not taking nights off, Jimmy Butler will possibly take nights where he's more so in a backseat role, more being that distributor role, because Jimmy Butler, he's going to make sure that his body is ready for the playoffs more than anything else. This is a team that's built for the postseason compared to the start of the regular season, but they have to be able to get through October, November, December, and January before they can even start thinking about April, May, and June. And that's where I get back to Jonathan Kuminga. And it doesn't even have to be for the fact that they need him for the entirety of the season, but you need him by January 15th, by February 5th, that 3-week window of where Jonathan Kuminga can be traded. If he can up his value, if he can help the Warriors win in that time frame, now you're talking about the Warriors being able to go out and get a player that's more aligned with Steph Curry, with Jimmy Butler, with Draymond Green, with Al Horford, that can be more in win now mode. So at the end of the day, this has really felt like a lose-lose situation throughout the offseason, with what the narrative that has been created, the environment, the vibe going into media day and training camp. But this can still be a win-win situation for both the Warriors and Jonathan Kuminga. Let's talk about 2 fits before I wrap up here, because the question marks a lot of the times come down to Jonathan Kuminga and Steph Curry. And then, of course, after the acquisition of Jimmy Butler, we saw that positionally the roles that Jimmy Butler and Jonathan Kuminga play, they offset each other. Like they don't fit as far as that goes. Two players that don't really stretch the floor, that have the same role in Steve Kerr's offense. So let's start with Steph Curry and Jonathan Kuminga. As I mentioned, Steph Curry is going to need some nights off. We're talking about a 37-year-old who in back-to-back years has played at least 70 games. Is it fair to assume that he's going to reach that number again this season when he'll turn 38 in March? Maybe, because of the way that he takes care of his body, but also maybe not, and it might not be the best thing for the Warriors. There were 10 games last year where Jonathan Kuminga played and Steph Curry didn't. In those 10 games, Jonathan Kuminga averaged 19.6 points per game. The Warriors also went 5-5 in those games. But again, that's the guy that you can go to as more of a scoring option when Steph Curry needs nights off. Overall, when it came to Jonathan Kuminga and Steph Curry on the floor together, they played 37 games overall for a total of 545 minutes. They had a 118.7 offensive rating, a 109 defensive rating, which overall is a 9.4 net rating. That actually was the third best net rating for a combination next to Steph Curry when it came to a Warriors player that spent at least 500 or more minutes next to Steph Curry. So the way that Jonathan Kuminga works when he is more of that athletic get downhill, Steph Curry, greatest three-point shooter of all time, maybe you find ways for Jonathan Kuminga to be a better screener, for him to get downhill as Steph Curry is opening the floor for him as well too. Al Horford, the way that he opens the floor as a center, that could be a great player next to Jonathan Kuminga. The bigger question mark to me is Jonathan Kuminga and Jimmy Butler. Steve Kerr saw what a perfect fit Jimmy Butler is for the Warriors. The record spoke for itself when it came to the Warriors being a team that was one game below 500 before Jimmy Butler coming aboard, and then going 23-7 the rest of the regular season. With Jimmy Butler, they're 23-8 overall. The one game that Jimmy Butler missed, the Warriors, they lost. It was a really, really small sample size of Jimmy Butler and Jonathan Kuminga playing together in the regular season. The numbers were bad. And then you look at the final four playoff games in Minnesota when Steph Curry goes down with his hamstring issue. The go-to guys were, of course, Jimmy Butler and Jonathan Kuminga. Jonathan Kuminga averaged 24 points per game with really strong shooting splits actually in those final four games. I believe Jimmy Butler was right around 20 points per game. Shooting splits weren't great, but he still did all the other things as far as rebounding, his assists, his steals numbers. Those numbers, when it came to Jimmy Butler and Jonathan Kuminga next to each other, again, weren't great. But also, again, really, really small sample size. Now, finally, Jimmy Butler and Jonathan Kuminga have a full training camp together. They have a full preseason together. They have the opening of the regular season to see how this works. And even if they still aren't a great pairing next to each other, it might be more about the nights that Jimmy Butler needs to take a step back, or just might need a rest night as well in those areas that I talked about with the back-to-backs, so on and so forth. Deep breath. This is finally over. The saga has come to rest. Jonathan Kuminga will be back with the Warriors, 2-year, $48.5 million with that team option at the end of the contract. It is over, Dub Nation. Rest easy.